Hi, everyone. I'm Andy Smerick. I'm going to be the moderator of this session. It's on school-level innovation. And I'm totally intrigued by this topic, largely because I've done a bunch of public policy inside the government in my life. But also, I'm ambivalent on these issues because I feel like I'm pulled in two different directions. So sort of full disclosure, I like what we're about to talk about, but I also have misgivings, so you'll probably hear me throughout as using my moderator rights to push and prod along the way. So I love it when civically minded social entrepreneurs try to shake things up in the best interest of kids, try to knock down stuff that shouldn't be there, that's been there for way too long, and just don't take for granted things that we shouldn't take for granted anymore. So I love it. I get excited by that. I built the first part of my career on that. But I also worry, in full disclosure, that sometimes in education it seems like we can fetishize change and innovation and doing things differently. We sometimes support things that are new and different by virtue of their being new and different, because they can upend old stuffy ways that often we have a tendency to view as being antiquated. But the older I get in particular, and because I'm a conservative, I have a tendency to think sometimes things are old and stable, not because they're antiquated or not because they're stupid, not because they're like the accretion of a bunch of mistakes, but actually because they're evolutionarily robust. They've like stood the test of time for a reason. They are there because they've proven their value over time, and if you knock them down, you might actually do some damage. That old saying about, it's called Chesterton's fence. Before you knock down a fence on an old piece of property, you better be darn sure you know why it was put up. So I always get a little bit hesitant when we're talking about innovation because I wonder about what are we undoing that we're not going to realize we had undone and the damage. But then at the same time, I'm totally geared, psyched about doing all these new innovative things. So you can see I'm on both sides of Chesterton's fence on this one. So at minimum, what I want to do, try to push all of us in this session to at least grapple with the fact that there are two sides of this ledger, awesome, amazing pro stuff from any type of innovation and change, but also maybe some things on the con side. My favorite line in this kind of realm is there are many things in this world that are priceless, but that does not mean that they're not costless. They can be valuable, we can decide that we want to do them, but that doesn't mean that there aren't any downsides to them. So there are lots of state policies and local policies and even some federal policies that can both inhibit this stuff and advance it in different ways, but we are going to kind of shy away from that, at least at the beginning. This session is primarily about the stories, the real on-the-ground action led by the real courageous social entrepreneurs who are pushing it all. And so they're going to lead us through these discussions of their innovations, and there's a whole lot we can learn about it, including the stuff that I have surfaced as potential concerns or things to think about. Everything from why are we changing things in this particular way? How did we make the decision about the kinds of changes that we're going to implement? What kind of internal practices and policies that we have depended on are we going to put to the side, and what are the costs of that? What do grown-ups have to do differently? And that's everything from educators, administrators, policymakers, to parents with these new kinds of changes we have. What do students have to do differently? And then the biggest, trickiest, toughest question of all is how do we assess whether or not the changes on the whole were for the good, both in the short term and long term, and then just have a very open mind about, okay, we may have made some mistakes or there's some cost of what we've done. How do we mitigate the costs of all of that? So we have four of the very best people imaginable to talk about their innovations on the ground and for me to, like I said, push and prod along the way. So we have Scott Campbell, principal of Republic High School, and I'm going down the line this way. Rashid Davis, the founding principal of, it is a P-Tech school, right? So for those of you who don't know about P-Tech, Pathways in Technology, Early College High School. Patricia DeClotz, the superintendent of Kettle Moraine School District, and then Alicia Sells, the director of innovation for the Ohio Valley Educational Cooperative. So the way we're going to operate here is we only have an hour. Each of them is going to have 6 to 8 minutes to present. I'm going to just start to nudge them at about 8 minutes to see if they can move on. Then we're going to quickly move into audience questions because I have a feeling that a bunch of you are going to want to get into this quickly. So I'm going to probably forego the prerogative of the moderator to dominate things. I want to hand it to you, but then if things are not spicy enough, I'm going to try to push and prod to see if we can get some real conversation going. Sound good? Awesome. There we go. Okay, no more from me. Scott is first, and he has a presentation.
Hey,
Thanks all.
Great. Good morning. My name is Scott Campbell. I'm the principal of Republic High School in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm a recovering history teacher, so I have a robust slide deck, but I have 6 minutes, so I'm going to go pretty quickly through it. So Republic High School, our mission statement is reimagining public education in the South. In 2011, we opened 2 schools, Liberty Collegiate Academy and Nashville Prep middle schools in Nashville, Tennessee, that came together to become Republic Schools in 2014. And our mission is we know that there is historic inequality in the South, particularly for scholars of color. So we're trying to address the issues that those communities in particular have faced. So how do we do that? We believe that we're going to reimagine education in the South by preparing kids for college, believing that we have an unwavering commitment that the inevitable future of all of our scholars is college, yet we're also preparing them with the computer coding pathway that they could follow in CS pathways in college or outside of the college pathways that they may go directly into those industries. And so we also believe very passionately that we will not just reimagine education in the South if we have a good school. We also want to be the type of school that is going to empower and improve the schools around us to be better. So I'm going to just share with you a story through some numbers. So 92% of the scholars at Republic High School are Black or Latino scholars of color, and that is pretty consistent with our network as a whole. Republic High School is the one high school out of 7 total schools in both Nashville and Jackson, Mississippi. We have our first elementary school open this year, as well as 3 middle schools in Nashville and 2 middle schools in Jackson, Mississippi, serving 93% African American and Hispanic scholars. Our teaching faculty at Republic High School is 46.43% staff members of color. So we believe very passionately in making sure that our scholars are interacting with and being taught by people who are from some of the same communities that they are from as well. The first big number I'm going to share with you is 106. So in 2018, we had 106 Black and Latino scholars at Republic High School who took the AP Computer Science exam. There were 157 total in the state of Tennessee. So 67% of the scholars of color in the state of Tennessee who took the AP Computer Science exam took it at our school. Just to give you a picture of this, in 2016, before we opened, there were only 42 scholars of color in the entire state of Tennessee who took the AP Computer Science exam. So we're really trying to shake that up and make massive changes. Also, just access-wise, 68% of the total amount of scholars in Davidson County, Nashville, who took the AP Computer Science exam took it at our school as well. Just to give you a picture, and 14% of the entire state population who took it at our school. The next number is 3.77. This was the amount of growth on the ACT our scholars had in the last academic year. Our juniors started from where they started to where they ended taking it in March, so in about 9 months. The national average is about 1.5 points of growth, so we're really proud of this. And one of the things that I'll point out here is it can't just be about coding. We have to prepare our scholars for college, and ACT is that gatekeeper that they have to be successful at. So we have like a robust general program of instruction, not just around computer science. That includes a strong AP program. In the middle here is Delia Badenhorst, one of our scholars who's already passed with a 4 or 5, the A-Push, AP Calc, Lit, Psych, and CS AP exams. This year she's taking Lang, Latin, Stats, Physics, and Government. So she'll come in with a full year of college under her belt. And so we're really proud of Delia, but there are a number of scholars who find themselves in that same situation. We're really proud of the work that our scholars have done through our AP program. We offer 10 AP courses at Republic High School. Another thing that's a little bit innovative about us is our senior experiences. So each of our seniors, this is our first senior class graduating this year, but each of them is doing what we call a senior experience. So they are either doing an internship, we have 30 students doing that. They are doing a independent research, 16 are doing that. They are doing a service learning class. We have approximately 60 scholars doing that, or they are doing a capstone project. So each of them is doing a project that allows them to take the skills that they've learned over the last couple of years and think about how do we solve problems in the world using technology. So that ties back to our overall vision as an organization. Not all of them are making things with code, but some of them are. And they're looking at lots of different things. We've partnered with American Lung Association, our General Hospital, YMCA, Boys and Girls Club. Our kids are doing projects on homelessness, gentrification, incarceration, mental health, prison reform. And some of our independent research projects that I'm really interested in are the effects of incarceration on mental health. One of our scholars is doing research on, as well as a scholar who's looking at the gentrification of Nashville through photos and the impact on the communities which they live in. So we believe that giving scholars that senior experience is what's going to be a very helpful pathway towards their future in college. And I say all this to also say, this ties in really well with the last session. We're a big school that believes very firmly that we want to try to do the work we're doing on the same public dollar as our neighborhood institutions. So we're using that per pupil funding to do our work. Our average student to teacher ratio is 27-1. We don't have very small class sizes. And we actually have 673 scholars. We're the largest charter high school in Nashville right now, and we will be about 800 to 1,000. So our freshman class is 263 scholars. Our senior graduating class is 123. We started with 135, just to give you a sense as well. And not to throw any shade at some great charter schools out there, but I know some of our neighbors, they started with 109 and down to about 55 in their graduating class. We started with 135. We're going to graduate 123. We do truly believe that all means all, even when that is really challenging. We don't just want to exit kids out or encourage them to go back to their neighborhood school. And then the other piece that I think makes us innovative is, we believe in innovating for our kids. So there have been 3,300 scholars in a Republic school who've gotten coding teaching. But we've also taken that curriculum which we created and shared it with Metro Nashville Public Schools. And there are 6,000 scholars within Metro Nashville Public Schools for a total of 9,300 who have used our coding curriculum to develop those skills of the future for scholars. And this is the number we're trying to change. On Wired Magazine says, 22% of the total amount of people in CS programs throughout the country are Black or Latino, and at our school it's 93% of our scholars. We really are trying to flip those numbers and to provide more access, particularly for our scholars of color, to these fields that and traditionally they have not been a part of. So that's Republic High School. That's who we are. That's kind of how we look at the world. And I'll just say this, we're not doing everything perfect. You got to make choices and sacrifices as a starting burgeoning school. Our state test scores are not great because we haven't made a focus on it. We focused on ACT. We believe we're actually going to be more successful for our kids if they do really well on the ACT, and we don't care as much about them doing great on the state test scores. And there's some types of decisions you have to make as a school and mistakes that you make over the course, but we're excited about the work we're doing, and our hope, as we said, is to reimagine education in the South, not just for our scholars, but for all the scholars who go to schools in Metro Nashville and throughout the Southeast. That's it.
That was perfect. 8 minutes and 1 second. But that's amazing. So one thing that I just want to put a pin in that we can come back to is you mentioned it subtly, but at the end it's something I think with innovative schools we have to think about, which is you've made a decision that the metrics of old that people have relied on, in this case state test scores, are okay, they're good, but they're not dispositive in your mind. They don't end debate. There are other things that may be able to drive your program in better ways.
That's right, and we focus on the middle schools on MAP, and then we focus at the high school on ACT. So those are our first tests that we put our energy and time towards preparing kids for.
So good idea that sometimes if you set the metric of success in advance, you box in what kind of innovations are possible, but if you break down the measures of success, some of these innovations, you spread your wings some. Great idea. I think Rashid's next.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, so good morning, everyone, and thank you all for being here. So P-TECH is a grade 9 through 14 model. That means students enter at grade 9, no academic screening or tests for admission. We're partnered with the City University of New York City College of Technology specifically, because the students have the opportunity to pursue one of 2 computer science degrees, computer information systems or electromechanical engineering technology. Then those students are first in line for job opportunities with IBM. So we're working backwards from skills that industry say are needed. We opened in 2011. When you look at this reality, in New York State, for every 100 students, roughly 73 graduate on time, but more importantly, we're talking about only 23 finishing a 2 or 4 year degree 3 or 6 years after graduating from high school. And that is what we're trying to disrupt when we look at big picture data for New York State. When you look at this reality right here in 2009, 2010, this is the college ready and graduation rates disaggregated by race. And we could see that Black and Hispanic students in 2009 and 2010 had the lowest percentages of college readiness. This is New York City specifically. We opened 2011, but this is 2010. So for every 100 students in 9th grade in New York City, 2010, 81 finished high school by the 6th year. Okay, so now we have two benchmarks that we can think about in our 9 through 14. If at the end of the 6th year we could have at least 81 high school grads, and if we could have at least 23 students who have finished the associate's degree, we could be right where New York is with students leaving grade 12 and enrolling in college, okay? So just keep those two numbers in mind, 81 high school grads and at least 23 college grads by the end of the grade 14. This is, in New York City, admissions is controlled by our enrollment center at our Department of Education. Every 8th grader completes an application for 12 choices for a high school seat, and that includes all types of competitiveness in New York City. Schools that require tests for admissions, our specialized schools, we are identified as limited unscreened, no academic screening, no test for admissions at all. And the key tenets of our model is that we want people to come to the table with the understanding that if you want to do this work, you need industry, you need help from the governor's team who could deal with dual enrollment legislation, so that way students can have a pathway from high school and finishing a college degree without any issue. This is completely free to students and families. They don't pay for books, they don't pay for transportation, tuition, any cost at all. And here's our framework. We know that 9th grade is the make or break year. Okay, so how do we hook them? The thought is if we work backwards from the skills that industry say are needed, we make sure that in 9th grade, every student has a mentor. So they have a mentor from IBM that they get to interact with at least 2 to 3 times a year on site and on work site visits. So year 1, every student sees vision and mission realized, so then they could hear the messaging of why they need to take those higher level courses along the continuum. Our 9th grade has to look different because we are dealing with 2 computer science pathways. We know clearly, because we speak with the college faculty, about the stumbling blocks in courses like calculus. If students don't understand fractions, they're dead in the water in terms of calculus. So we have to work backwards with, with evidence from college faculty that could really strengthen the students from 9th grade entry. The students have the opportunity to get a paid 6-week internship experience the summer after their 3rd year of high school. But students can technically start taking college courses the summer after 9th grade if they meet the definition of college ready. That is through the state required graduation tests of English and mathematics. Our 9th grade year looks different. We have a longer school day and a longer school year, but what we did was we removed social studies and science from our 9th grade program. Why? Because for 125 students, we relatively have 110 feeder schools. So our students are coming from not vertical and horizontal conversations to where we could front load the skills that are needed. If you're not reading on grade level, I don't care if you're doing US history or global studies, you're not going to be able to pass those courses with a level of success that we think is important to put you on a pathway for a computer science degree. So what we did was we focused intentionally on literacy, numeracy, reading, and math. So that way, those are the building blocks. Math is the language for science. And so that's why science is not in 9th grade. We want students to be stronger, so that way we don't ask them to look to their left and the right and say that those students won't be there 4 years later. We want them to be able to look to the left and the right and encourage each other along this continuum. And so that's why the narrow focus in 9th grade is incredibly important. In 9th grade, they also have access to state assessments that determine college readiness. So we are working backwards from the definition of college readiness. And so we think that if we could expose them to the high stakes exam early on, we can demystify it. and allow them to not fear it at all. And so they will take it as many times as necessary to meet the definition of college ready. 65 is passing, but the definition of college ready on the English is 75. And so for the math, it's 70 on the Common Core algebra regions. So the thought is if you introduce them early, and particularly if they have not been on a continuum of really being confident, you can help have them really break down the fear that they have with education. And so you want to be able to hook them as early as possible so that way they can be able to experience enough of the college before grade 12. So it's not compulsory. So you have to be able to create a culture that hooks the students, grades 9 through 11, so that way that traditional 12th grade year, they would have experienced enough of college to want to remain to be able to finish the degree. And so that is why we narrow the focus and we assess early and often in terms of to be able to show. We've finished two 9 through 14 cohorts, and this particular sheet right here shows you the percentages of college readiness for both cohorts, but also students. So we started with 104 students summer of 2012. Of those 104 students from 2012, 53 of them have earned a computer science degree, with 15 currently working at IBM. The second cohort, we had 128 in the summer of 2013. Of the 128, 38 have already completed the degree, with 7 currently working at IBM. You can see the percentages of college readiness. I have a few handouts in the back there so that way you can have the PowerPoint for yourself. But the reality of it is narrowing the focus, assessing early and often, giving industry mentors, thinking about the opportunity that the classroom doesn't only exist in the building, but it exists at the college. It exists on industry tours. And irregardless of what zip codes that you come from, if we rethink time, if we rethink human capital, we can make sure to be able to meet students where they are and give them the opportunity to be successful along the pathways that we have created. Women in STEM, we know the numbers are tiny, and we are majority male, more than 95% Black or Hispanic, and more than 70% male, with Black males being the highest percentage. But when we look at our females, that from the first cohort, 100% of them not only finished, 100% of them finished high school, and we could see that 14 out of 25 actually finished a STEM degree. So we know that we've created a culture to where women who may be the minority still feel comfortable enough to persist to and through degree completion, and we are very, very happy about that. When we look at the young men, who are not academically screened or tested for admission, we could see the number of young men with more than 50% who've actually finished a STEM degree. And so we know that within our pipeline, 6 years after 9th grade, you're talking about more than 50% of students not only finishing high school, but finishing a STEM degree without the need of remediation, which is very important. So we really are the Statue of Liberty of education, because we're meeting students where they are coming in at grade 9 and trying not to make them feel shameful or embarrassed, but making them feel comfortable to be lifelong learners. In New York State, the highest 3-year graduation rate is 44%, and that's by Gutman Community College. Our 3-year graduation rate is 59%. And that's 59% with STEM degrees. If you looked at STEM degrees and all of those 3-year completion rates, you will be talking about single-digit outcomes. And I say that because what I don't have included in the PowerPoint, I have included in the chart right there. 6 years, we opened 2011. National Student Clearinghouse released data for students who graduated high school and enrolled in college 2011, and 6 years later, irregardless of the school type that they attended, low income, high minority, low minority, urban, suburban, rural, the highest percentage of earning a STEM degree was 16%. So we know that we're on the right path in terms of doing something. We were fortunate enough to be mentioned in the State of the Union in 2013 by President Obama, and followed up by a visit in 2013 as well. And so the replication has gone from 1 school in 2011 to more than 110, 10 states, outside of the U.S. and Australia, Morocco, Taiwan, recently announced Ireland, Colombia, France, and Brazil.
Thank you. Just one quick question. Do you have, or your team have something in mind like at your best, what percentage of your graduates would go directly into the workforce? What percent would go directly into a certificate program or an AA degree or college? Or do you kind of just leave that up to the students?
We did not begin with established targets that we would define as success. That's why I showed you the 23 students who actually have finished a degree after graduating from New York State schools. So the thought was, if we could outperform that 23, if we could outperform 81 students graduating high school in 6 years, then those would be targets of success.
Great, thank you. Patricia?
So we are located, the Kettle Moraine School District, 30 miles west of Milwaukee, 45 miles east of Madison. And when I stepped into my role as superintendent in 2006, we had 6 high-achieving blue ribbon schools of excellence, at least according to the U.S. Department of Education. We now boast 10 schools, and we're personalizing learning in each and every one of them. We started by having 2 charter high schools in 2010, one where you learn through the performing arts and one of a school of global leadership. The following year, we added an elementary charter school that's multi-age and project-based, along with an advanced manufacturing site-based youth apprenticeship. Then we added our high school of health sciences and a middle school house that is again multi-age project-based. And this past year, we brought Summit Learning into our middle school as a Summit Learning platform, as a tool. This year, scaling it from 6th grade to include 7th grade. That's outside of the Create House. So, a lot of innovation in a relatively short amount of time for a fairly small district. We serve less than 4,000 students. How do we do this? Well, many districts have a mission statement. Some have a vision, but very few have a charge. And in 2005, my locally elected school board passed a unanimous motion charging administration to transform our educational delivery system to better and more efficiently meet the needs of all students, and that has been our quest.
As much time as we spent looking into where do we want our kids to go to school, we really considered every district, public and private, in the Milwaukee metro area. We did a lot of research and decided that we wanted them to be in Kettle Moraine schools. And so we moved here. We obviously made this deliberate choice because of the personalized learning environment. We weren't really ready for the reality of what that actually looked like. It was so different from what our own experience was in education as kids, as students ourselves. And so it was an interesting evolution that we went through, both my husband and I. With that unfamiliarity sometimes comes discomfort, a little bit of anxiety. It took me a long time to understand why the methods are different than they were back in, say, maybe 1980, like when I was in elementary school. They're different because we know better.
School hasn't really evolved in the past, 50, 75 years, and it really should, like everything else in this world. The way that parents were taught should not be the way that we are taught.
It's just changed so much for the better, though. This is my 35th year that I have been teaching. When I first started teaching, it felt like I was in front of the class and there was a whole group all day long. I taught kindergarten, and I would have some readers come in. Oh, but don't read that book with them because we use that in 1st grade, but he's ready to read, versus the outlier on the other side who's coming in and doesn't even know all their sounds yet. So how can they even engage in what I'm teaching if this one doesn't even know what I'm talking about because that word up here is just the first letter to him, whereas this one's like, oh my gosh, I knew that, when I was 4.
Personalized learning, in its name, it's like by each person. So I think teachers really have to adapt to be able to cater to a lot of different students' needs, and that includes like people who need a little bit extra help and people who can just like zoom through a course because they love it so much.
They're each such little individuals already, so when they come in, I kind of get to know them and get to know what they like, what they don't like, and then we start with the goal setting. I feel like I'm more of their coach. It's not that factory model anymore where you're just doing one thing.
the access to information is really the key to the learning environment that we have here.
I feel like I'm bopping around the room a lot more than I used to be. So that's a huge change. Whatever you need, you get. It's a busy and sometimes it's a loud room, but if you look, everybody's on task.
I don't think that kids can just skate by like we used to be able to get away with. It's not so much about how the teaching occurs, it's how is the learning occurring. Every child learns in their own way, and they're going to learn a topic differently, and that's what is being harnessed in the personalized learning environments.
Personalized learning is what's come out of all the research that we've been able to understand about how kids grow and learn now. So it's more about what do they want to learn and how can I help them to learn that.
So through personalized learning, we're moving our entire district to a model of competency-based progression. When students demonstrate mastery, they move on. High school credits are awarded when they're earned, and that could be any day of the school year. It's not about seat time, it's about demonstration. Our high school graduate profile reinforced the message that we heard yesterday from Senator Sass. And in Kettle Moraine, we believe, yes, academics are important, but even more important are the skills and dispositions that describe this graduate. Starting in kindergarten and continuing every year after, we work with students to develop them as continuous learners, communicators, collaborators, creative and critical thinkers. We equip them to be engaged citizens and self-directed, resilient individuals. This profile, these dispositions are what will be their pathway for success as they leave Kettle Moraine, and we believe we're preparing our students for their future. So one more look into our campus of 4 high schools.
At a typical high school, you don't have options. Here, you've got 4. At a typical high school, you don't get hands-on experience in the health field. Here, you learn directly from community leaders and earn professional certifications. Here, you get opportunities normally reserved for students in medical school. At a typical high school, you don't get to spend a semester researching a topic that interests you. Here, you get one-on-one mentorship from a coach as you design your learning plan. Here, you gain perspective and leadership qualities through experiences in your local and global community. At a typical high school, you don't get to explore all of your subjects through an arts focus. Here, you learn math in the places where it's used, like building a set or lighting a stage. Here, you learn about world culture and get physical education credit in a dojo. At a typical high school, you don't get to explore a career pathway until after you graduate. Here, you get credit for hands-on projects like restoring an arcade machine or building a website. Here, you learn the skills and technology to compete in the job market. At a typical high school, you're waiting for the next step. But here, you take it.
We believe we are doing the right work, and I close with this celebration slide because it honors our educators and what they're doing, and it shows that others approve of the work that we're trying to accomplish. But it's not a sentiment that's shared by everyone. This past summer, I had a small but very vocal group begin an anti-campaign. They want traditional. The good news is they can get it, but not in Kettle Moraine. So what I need from you is legislative policy and support that supports innovation and redesign of what schooling is in order to help us meet the needs of the students as we prepare them for their future. Thank you.
Okay, we have one more presenter. Alicia, please.
All right. Hello, everybody. It's nice to see you on this Friday afternoon. I'll wrap us up by talking about some major policy changes that I think we can make to high school in America. that are important for our students as we look at getting them ready for the workforce. So 5 years ago, we planned a high school called ExcelinEd Academy that grew out of the desire of rural superintendents to offer their students STEM education that they could not do individually by themselves. Project Lead the Way is an expensive program to fund in a small rural district, even more difficult to staff in a small rural district, and ExcelinEd grew out of that. One of the things that we've discovered in this process, we'll graduate our first class this year, so I'm going to speak to you not about what our school looks like or our program is like, but some of the outcomes that we're seeing. College is too expensive to be the time that we find ourselves. I remember when I went to college, it was without a whole lot of direction. I thought maybe I wanted to be a doctor, even though I was terrible at math and science was not my greatest forte. But I was encouraged to go to college and explore, take classes, find myself. It is too expensive for that to happen for kids, and I think that's a reality we have to face in America. Americans owe more than $1.5 trillion in student loans, which is more than we owe on credit cards or auto loans. So the time to go to college and wander around and explore and be that perpetual college student or not be on task to degree has really passed us by. At our high school, we're all about college and work. That's not necessarily what every student needs, but I believe far more students in America need that in high school than are currently getting it. ExcelinEd does not base admission to our school on academic grades or test scores. So we have about a 67 to 70% free and reduced lunch percentage at any given time, and we have very low family educational attainment. The 5 counties that we serve, and it is a regional high school where each public school district contributes a certain amount to the budget every year, is around 9 to 13% of their population that has had some college or finished an associate degree. So very low educational attainment. Our first graduating class this May will be 30 students. 24 will graduate with an Associate of Science, 4 with an Associate of Applied Science to go directly into the workforce, and 2 with 22 hours or more of dual credit. So I think if you think back to what I just told you about that student profile, that's pretty important. Our GPAs, and this is a hard slide, well, it's not as hard to read when it's big, but 3.78 is the GPA, our average GPA for juniors. Remember that that includes a year of college work. Our average GPA for sophomores, 3.5, 3.27 for freshmen. This is a grand experiment, and that's one of the things about innovation that's both scary and also really exhilarating. We work to get students ready for college according to either the ACT or TABE by the end of their sophomore year. So you can see in year 1, 87% of our students were college ready. The 13% we worked with over the summer and into the fall as they enrolled in college. In our second year, 96% were college ready. So it's really, to me, proof that if you set the bar high for students, they're going to overcome it and prove to you that they can. A big part of what we do at ExcelinEd is encourage students to select a career pathway as they come in. They actually declare a major with us. They are able to go to the area technical center to do technical hybrid Project Lead the Way pathways. They also can do engineering, computer science, and healthcare, both an associate to bachelor's nursing program and Project Lead the Way biomed. So our current class has 41 work certifications. We expect some of those to graduate with stacked work certs and those numbers to go up. I want to propose some policy issues to you that we're seeing come out of this experience at ExcelinEd, and as we get ready, we hope to open our second school. First is a somewhat controversial notion, but I believe, and in talking to our students, that high school should be a 2-year experience. If they take core math, English, social studies, I loved what you talked about with P-TECH in terms of moving that around so students feel confident. Then if that last 2 years of their experience is more career academy focused, more career focused, I think it's relevant. It's relevant to what you were saying about hooking them in and keeping them in high school with careers in mind and preparing for those careers as their goal. Again, our students they declare a major. A policy change that we are going to try to propose in Kentucky is that we not penalize students or technical schools for students moving in and out of CTE pathways as non-completers. That's a very important part of the exploration. Taking college gen ed in high school, finishing that core that could transfer can cut college debt by 25 to 50%. So what we're working on right now with students is how to take that associate degree that they're earning with us, or those 22 plus hours of dual credit, and mapping that with college advisors on how long it will take them to finish, so that they go to college or university with a very clear plan of how to finish, how long it's going to take, how much they can work during a semester. And that is cycle breaking for our students. It's not only cycle breaking because they're going to be, in many, many cases, the first students to go to college. They've already had enough college. It's not even a discussion anymore about whether or not they're going to go, which I'm sure you're experiencing too. And that they are ready and focused, and they know what they're going to spend their money on. So that's a very different discussion for us with them with their FAFSA information. I also think that it is critically important, and we built iLead around this information, that as educators and policymakers, we become much more familiar with labor market data. Our students know where they can go to work. They know what they can earn. It's a part of our advisory process. It is critical for us to understand our connection as education to the workforce pipeline. That has become a large topic of discussion in education, but I think it is much more necessary for us to train advisors in every school district and every school who understand what labor market demand means, how to read the data, and where to find the data. I also think in terms of soft skills, one of the things that we have really struggled with is how do you teach that? And what parts of social emotional learning are the school's purview and the parents' purview? One of the things that we did with our local industry council is we really pushed them to talk to us beyond school. We need people who have a pulse, who show up, who come back from lunch, who pass a drug test. And we measured those things for our students in a work readiness report card and ongoing discussion and evaluation with them, but it all starts with a self-evaluation. So they know where their weaknesses are, and we work with them on achieving those goals. I also think that high school students, and this is one I would love to see across the nation, requires 2 capstone projects at the 2 transition points. As you declare the major, what are you going to spend the next 2 years doing to achieve your goals? And then when you transition out of college, or out of high school and you go into college, our students will do a defense of their capstone this year on how ready they are to transition into that workforce. The advisory requires guidance counselors to play a different role. It's time for us to part ways with the notion that the guidance counselors are going to talk to every student in the school about what to do after high school. It's not happening, and it's terrifying children that it's not, and they are going out into the world without a lot of information about what to do after they walk out of that door in high school, and it's time to get really real about that. And then the last thing I'll conclude with, for legislators in the room, we desperately need your help in getting post-secondary policies to adapt early college. Colleges would much rather have our students when they're paying the full tuition amount. They would like to limit the courses they can take in college. It's difficult to transfer courses unless the legislature acts and requires them to be accepted by all state institutions. And for students who are taking college courses in high school, we need another factor than ACT for college scholarships to state schools. Because our students are taking the ACT earlier, they may not have as high an ACT score, which knocks out their eligibility for college scholarships. So I'll conclude there.
That's perfect, thank you. Before I open up, please get your questions ready. Before, I just want to get some governance operations questions answered real quick from each of you. So Scott, your school is a charter, and so I assume that 100% of your kids opt in, or is it the residential-based school for some number of kids?
That's right, opt-in.
Opt-in 100%, and are you authorized by the local school district or some other entity?
Local school district.
Okay, and then Rashid, you are a P-TECH school that is embedded within New York City public schools. So you are part of the district, but your kids choose to go to the school, or they're assigned there?
Some, they choose to go.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then Alicia, you run you serve the students from a range of different districts, so you're regional. So they pay in, essentially do students from those districts, they have tuition paid to your school, and they choose to go to your school as well. And you're overseen by a county regional entity?
So when we created iLead, charters were not allowed in Kentucky, so we created a kind of weird hybrid model. The board is the 5 superintendents of the districts that pay into the school.
Got it.
They pay $95,000 a year to operate the school. And that is not based on a per pupil amount, it's just based on the budget that we develop together. It is a public school, not a charter.
Got it. And Patricia, it's a traditional public school district.
Correct.
But at the high school level, are kids choosing between the high schools, or are they all residentially assigned?
There's choice, and
Okay.
it's instrumentality charters, so all of the employees are employees of the district,
Uh-huh.
and it's just the assignment that determines where they work.
Got it. Okay, I just bring this up as often innovation rises and
Yeah.
falls depending on who has the authority to make these decisions, parents, districts, authorizers, the state. So it's at least part of the mix. Questions? Yes, please. Do we have a microphone? Great.
Hi.
If you don't mind, just introduce yourself.
Julie Connor-Lindy with the Walton Family Foundation. All of these are exemplary models, obviously, but Scott, I was particularly interested in yours. I was wondering what % of those graduated began their freshman year in a public school?
Yeah, so right now it's around 87% of the scholars who are going to be in our graduating class will have started with us and spent that time. And it's actually over 80% started with us in 5th grade at one of our charter middle schools. But we do backfill from other traditional schools up until, so freshman, sophomore year, junior year, right about now, actually, that we usually stop backfilling. So if kids want to come in at their senior year, there's just so many credit issues, or in the second semester of their junior year.
Great, and as a follow-up, one thing I really appreciated about that was that you had minimal flow back into the traditional neighborhood schools. What enabled you to do that, and where do you think other charters are failing where you're succeeding?
I mean, gosh, this is such a hard one because I think it's just a commitment. Like, all means all. Like, these are our kids. We're not looking at a kid when they're struggling behaviorally or when they have an IEP that's difficult to be able to fulfill based off of your funding sources and the staff that you have. We don't guidance them out, which is unfortunately what happens at other places. And so you just have to work with those families, make plans around the scholars, and then find ways to help them. So I mean, it's tough, but I don't have a perfect solution, except that we truly believe all means all, and we just stick ourselves to that. And I have had to be checked at times when I wanted to be I'm not sure whether this is the right place for you. We just don't have those conversations with families.
Nice. Over here.
Randy Howe from Colorado. Interested in what some of the specific policy barriers that you encountered and how you got around them to do the innovations that you did. I've been in this world over a long time, and there's a lot of barriers out there.
Yeah, and if you don't mind, when you're pointing them out, let us know if it's a federal funding stream problem, a regulation at the state level, local level. Open to any of you.
Sure. I would think one of the reasons we started with charter schools in my district was to be able to waive some of our state expectations, specifically around seat time and competencies, and to move it that way. We've now seen a little more flexibility, and that's why we didn't charter in our middle school. We didn't have to waive it. But a lot of the reporting requirements are very much backward focused into a traditional mindset. Even course descriptions were very interdisciplinary, and some of those policy issues are not necessarily at the legislature. Sometimes they're at the Department of Instruction.
So for us, the major one was graduation requirements, state graduation requirements. If anyone from the State Department of Ed or our state board is in here, kudos to them for just taking a major effort and swing at trying to make those more robust. It was not met with great enthusiasm by a lot of people. The fact that we had a waiver from the state graduation requirements, which allowed us to create the students' junior and senior experience, or their experience once they benchmarked for college admission, changed the world for these kids. Because we're able to create an experience for each of them that enabled them to move toward their career path. So instead of us fooling around with, are we getting them 4 years of high school English, and they're taking college English, and they're taking college math, we were able to just eliminate that last 2 years of high school and move forward with a different approach.
Dual enrollment legislation is incredibly important because each state has different requirements, and so you would actually want to move away from dual enrollment that's based on grant and actually have it embedded in funding, so that way, in the event the players change, the system still can continue moving without worrying about competing for grants.
Two small things. One would be graduation requirements. The particular course pathway that scholars have to take is sometimes challenging when you want them to also take additional computer science courses or these capstone projects, and you just can't. You have to finagle their schedules and how we do it. And then the last one would just be small funding sources. Like I talked a little bit about us wanting to do things on the same public dollar. So that just means like we have to take from that per pupil funding source money to pay for things like security, or that there aren't funding sources for charter schools around that, or special education, additional services. They have to provide school psychologists, school counselors, those type of things, or sometimes we just have to figure out how to work it into our overall budget to be able to do those things that our scholars need the most.
Yeah, for what it's worth, I think this is the most interesting question related to high school and career technical programs and like going into college. The fact that all of you pointed out high school graduation requirements. For so long, I was part of this camp of saying we need to be firm, we need to be uniform, we need to be rigorous on high school graduation requirements. That's the only way a diploma means something, until I realized how much innovation that was thwarting by schools saying, actually, if you allowed us to do A and B instead of C, we might be able to help these kids better. It does then cut against the uniformity and our ability to report things, and some people say, oh, that might be more lax. But if I had to predict, this is the area of growth in the next 5 years for policymakers, high school graduation requirements.
Tony from Maryland School of Education. I was impressed with the graduation grades. The 30 students had a social grade studies, social impact science in 22 hours. How did you get them to that point?
I believe they were below grade average when they started with you.
How did we get them to that many hours of college credit? So we just created an expectation that that's what they were supposed to do, and they didn't know any better. So they, the expectation is that everyone graduates with an associate degree for everybody. So even the kids who are reading at the third grade reading level, when they come to us, that's the expectation. We don't tell them any different than that. For the students who are not going to graduate with an associate degree, that's a very personal discussion with the student, mom, dad, if we can find mom and dad in a lot of cases, and so never saying to the student, you're not going to meet our expectation, but here's what you're going to do with this amazing effort that you've made to get these 22 hours, and how that's going to translate into greater success for you and faster success for you. So, but we just tell them all that that's what they're going to do.
Up front.
This has been very fascinating. Thank you for sharing. All of you are creating schools that I think all of us would love our children to go to. The issue I have is, to what extent is what you're doing being replicated anywhere? Rashad, you said you got some schools going around the country. Patricia, I'm particularly interested in yours because you're a public district. To what extent has the state of Wisconsin come to you and said, we want to do what you're doing? And do you get the chance to hire your own teachers? Are you breaking some of the rules? Most people create great schools in spite of the system, not because of it.
Yeah. I don't know that I'm breaking any of the rules, but I definitely push And I would say that there is an awareness that's growing, and there is an institute that's trying to help support this and build. The professional development of teachers is so essentially important, and I forget now which speaker mentioned it, but that Andreas talked about autonomy. The role of autonomy in having our teachers, our educators see themselves as professionals is profound. And when we can build a culture that enables them to be the problem solvers, they come up with amazing work. And I would say that it is being replicated. Now, I would say one of the pushbacks, I have a board that governs through policy governance, so I am the CEO, and their two jobs, hire or fire me and advocate for me, and that's it. So I make decisions and I keep them informed. Other boards micromanage their superintendent and they don't give them a charge. So when your performance every year is evaluated on how have you transformed, you make things happen. You know, that's just the bottom line.
Other thoughts about replication?
We're trying to open our second school next year, or maybe the year after that. And I say that just because one of the school districts involved is involved in some state takeover and some challenges, so it may take a little longer. I would love to have one, you know, I'd love to be Eva Moskowitz when I grow up, but there are a zillion of these all across, you know, not just necessarily called iLead, but that model, not only in newly open schools, but to scale some of the things that I talked about in comprehensive high schools. Because quite honestly, I think comprehensive high schools are a dinosaur, and they're not serving our kids. And the more that we can do to push change at the comprehensive high school level, and it's going to happen legislatively, because districts are not going to do it. They're not going to.
And I'll just real quick speak, like, I worked at Valor Collegiate Academies, another charter school in Nashville, before I came over to Republic. They are now taking their social emotional learning curriculum, and it's 150 schools around the country they're working with. You know, we have around 6,000 scholars, like I said, who are using at Republic schools our curriculum in their middle schools right now. And so I think there's it's not just about scaling and creating more. Like, we've actually made a choice not to make more Republic schools, but to find ways to take pieces of the program that are effective and encourage our neighborhood schools to be able to start to use them. I think that's the starting point, because if you just start like creating a whole bunch of more and scale up, there's a whole lot of problems associated with that, but it's also not it's not serving the swath that we really want to serve, which is all kids, not just like our kids. And so
That's right.
I think we have time for one more question. Over there, please.
Hi there, my name's Maria Worthen with iNACOL. I would like to, hi Pat, I'd like to circle back to the this discussion around graduation rates and this idea of a meaningful credential. Pat, you talked about moving away from seat time towards competency, and you're all concerned with graduation. And what does it really mean for students to be prepared for success? Does the current way that we measure and award high school graduation credentials actually certify that students are ready for the next step?
And if I can ask the panelists, given we're short on time, feel free to respond to the question, but then also whatever kind of final wrap-up statements, please feel free. We'll go down the line.
Well, and I'm just going to give kudos to iNACOL, because that is where we first got our inspiration. Like, how do you transform? We went there, and the majority of people attending were charter schools, so we learned a lot. And that collaboration, hugely important. But I think that we do not move people unless they demonstrate proficiency. So if it takes you 1.5 years to do algebra, or 2 years, it takes you that long. But if it takes you 4 months, that's okay too. The demonstration of proficiency is the secret of success for what does a diploma stand for. It's only if those characteristics of a diploma are demonstrated at a proficient level that it means something to both the person who's earned it and the person who's recognizing it. So to me, that is really at the heart of what we're trying to do. And collaboration, it has to be about all kids. It can't be about my kids and your kids. separate. It has to be about America's kids and others.
I think that the current high school diploma in Kentucky, I can speak to that, is absolutely no evidence whatsoever that a student is ready for life after high school.
We've had 4 cohorts of students, and 86% of them have graduated, with 28% actually earning the degree without remediation, and 5% currently working at IBM. But keep in mind that we are a 9 through 14 model, so 2 of those cohorts still have 2 additional years to finish the college degree.
Any final thoughts?
I have no final thoughts.
One thing just for the policymakers in here, are there any policymakers left in here? Great. One thing to consider, if I can be so pushy, is ask yourself, if you had great social entrepreneurs like these in your states or others, and they wanted to come in and do something like this, what are the inhibitions that you currently have in policy that would stop them from doing this, or people with similar ideas? Is it your charter authorization law? Is it your funding formula? Is it your collective bargaining agreements, or what else? One lesson I've learned over the long term is there are lots and lots and lots of people like this. The question for policymakers is, do we have a fertile field where they can plant their seeds and grow stuff? It's not a lack of them, it's probably a lack of the environment for them to succeed. So unless there are final comment, oh, please.
I just want to make one more comment that might offend some people.
Please do it.
Not as much as what I just said.
It is tied to that. So I was just asked, are we unionized? And Governor Scott Walker initiated Act 10, and that probably not only saved my district's life, but also gave us the ability to do the work that we're doing without negotiating every single step of it. And it has really encouraged the educators, empowered them. So I do think that there are some things that can be roadblocks, and I'm very glad that the roadblocks were removed before I took on those challenges.
Good.
Pardon?
Do you want? Can you take that offline? Because I got to shut this down. I promised them. But yeah, that Act 10 question about unionization, that's very important. Okay, thank you everyone. Thanks for the ExcelinEd team and our guests.